Hello, this is a very edited version of my previous Lawrence film. I do apologise, it had to be taken down for copyright reasons. Very warm welcome to my YouTube this evening. We're taking a look at the time that Lawrence of Arabia resigned from the army and then re-enlisted in the RAF, and he was eventually posted to RAF Mount Batten, where Lawrence worked as a clerk to his commanding officer, helping to organise the Schneider Trophy race for seaplanes and flying boats, which took place off Culshot in 1929. Lawrence began his association with motorboats following the crash of the Blackburn Iris in Plymouth Sound, where Lawrence was extremely distressed that they couldn't reach the aircraft in time in the rescue boats they had at the time. So he got involved in organising and developing a small powerboat that would eventually become the high-speed rescue launches that were very much developed into the early 1940s. It was the Blackburn Iris seaplane that crashed in Plymouth Sound, and we've got some actual footage of the Blackburn Iris here to show you the size of the aircraft and the complexities of starting it and flying it and landing it on the water in Plymouth Sound. It was on January the 12th, 1933, 4 flying boats left from Mount Batten for training in the Sound. S-1263 had executed a series of practice takeoffs and landings, taking off parallel to Plymouth Breakwater and landing between Drake's Island and the Breakwater Light. On her last takeoff run, when halfway across the Sound at considerable speed, she saw a dockyard launch crossing her bows. The pilot thought he would be airborne before the launch crossed her path, so he carried on, but suddenly the aircraft took a violent swing to port. The plane tried to avoid the launch, but the wings struck in a welter of spray. Edward Ham, on the launch, shouted, "Look out!" and threw himself on the deck. There was a crash, and he saw the coxswain of the boat lying on the deck. Immediately after, the plane sank with its port wing up in the air just off Ramscliffe Point. At the same time, some Plymouth fishing drifters were putting to sea, and they came to the rescue, along with an RAF rescue craft from Mount Batten. The crew climbed out of the aircraft onto the wing that was above the water and were picked up by the rescue craft. There seems little doubt that Lawrence of Arabia's years in Plymouth were one of the happiest periods of his life, truly his golden reign, as he inscribed a copy of his translation of the Odyssey that he gave to Claire Sidney Smith, who was the wife of the commanding officer at RAF Mount Batten, Wing Commander Sidney Smith. Lawrence's first view of Plymouth on February the 2nd, 1929 was obscured by a blanket of dense fog. He arrived on board the P&O liner, the Arabian, having been summoned home from India after rumours appeared in the press concerning his supposed involvement in an insurrection in Afghanistan. After a month's leave in London, he was posted to the flying boat unit at RAF Mount Batten, where his arrival was memorably described by Claire in her book The Golden Reign. At the gates of Catwater, on it was a small blue-clad figure, very neat and smart, with peak cap, goggles, gauntlet, gloves and a small dispatch case slung on his back. Aircraftman Shaw had arrived to take his place in the miniature world of the RAF station. The Peninsula of Mount Batten, as is seen in the extract from the 1919 Ordnance Survey map, is a dog-leg-shaped spur of land in the northeast corner of the great natural harbour which is Plymouth Sound. Separating it from the city of Plymouth is the Catwater, a stretch of water about a quarter of a mile wide. Viewed across the Catwater from Plymouth, its most prominent feature is the 17th century artillery tower perched on an almost vertical cliff. The whole peninsula was requisitioned as a seaplane station in 1917, with the nearby Castle Inn turned into the station commander's home. After being left almost empty after the war, the station was reopened in 1928 under the command of Group Captain Sidney Smith. Catwater proves to be about 100 airmen pressed tightly onto a rock half awash in the Sound on a peninsula, really like a fossil lizard swimming from Mount Batten golf links across the harbour towards Plymouth. The sea is 30 yards from our hut and 70 yards the other way. The camp offices are peaceful, it seems, and the airmen are reasonably happy. That is good hearing for me, as I have to share their good fortune. A quote by T.E. Lawrence to H.S. Ede, 1929. Lawrence worked as a clerk to his commanding officer, helping to organise the Schneider Trophy race for seaplanes and flying boats, which took place off Culshot in 1929. It was at Mount Batten that Lawrence began his association with motorboats, initially with Clare in their own small powerboat, the Biscuit. It was presented as a gift after the Schneider Trophy event. It was in the Biscuit that the two of them explored the Tamar estuary on the picnic trips remembered so delightfully in the book The Golden Rain. Lawrence's relative contentment at the Catwater is reflected in letters he wrote from here. But on the morning of the 4th of February 1931 occurred a tragic accident that was to shape the remainder of his RAF years. Sitting with Clare just below the artillery tower in a hollowed out area they called the Lido, Lawrence witnessed one of the station's Blackburn Iris 3 flying boats crash into Plymouth Sound, with the loss of 9 lives. Taking part in the rescue efforts convinced him of the need to develop high-speed rescue craft for the RAF, which became the focus of the rest of his service career. Lawrence remained in the RAF as Aircraftsman Shaw until he retired from the service in February 1935 at the age of 46. He retired to his country cottage, Clouds Hill, at Bovington. Very sadly, just a few months into his retirement, he was involved in a motorcycle accident when he swerved to avoid 2 boys on bicycles and died some days later on the 19th of May 1935 from his head injuries. But such was the persona that's been created that several rumours surrounded his death, including one that he'd committed suicide. Yet another conspiracy theory blamed the authorities. Such is the end that appears for many folk heroes. Sadly, the real truth was it was a motorcycle accident and there was no more to it than that. I really hope we can move on and look at some of the ideas that Lawrence developed with the high-speed launches, and that you've enjoyed this film so far. Please continue watching. We're just going to take a look at some of the high-speed launches and some of the developments that came from his work with Scott Payne back in those heady years of the early 1930s.
My name is Group Captain Todd. During the war, I commanded an RAF station on the east coast of England. This is a story of some of the men of an air-sea rescue unit who served under my command. They didn't fly, but went to sea in high-speed launches. Their job? To rescue their comrades from the sea. Their motto?
Now, in modern times, at what was RAF Mount Batten, there are 2 remaining hangars which are now Grade 2 listed, and they're used by yacht builders. 2 other hangars have given way to a car park. Much of the Mount Batten Peninsula is now devoted to housing and marine activities, though the memories of Lawrence's occupation are kept alive in the names of the roads here, Lawrence Road and Shore Way. What remains of course is the stunning natural setting. A steep path will take you up to the top of the headland on which the artillery tower stands, and here is a wide space of flat ground littered with bases of anti-aircraft facilities installed during World War II, which may or may not be the Lido where Lawrence sometimes spent his breaks sitting with Clare. I really hope you've enjoyed the look back at Lawrence of Arabia and the time he spent at Plymouth, which was amongst the happiest time of his life. It's been really interesting researching this, and I really hope it comes across as interesting for you to watch. It's taken a huge amount of research to put this together, and it's just such a small section of his life when he was based at RAF Mount Batten in Plymouth. Thank you for watching along, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take all the greatest care you can, and I wish you the very best. Cheers for now.